Tidbit, 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 tidbits by Tidbit Audio, tidbit, tidbit, tidbit LED, tidbit mutes, tidbit overdrive and fuzz, tidbit or, tidbit, tidbit wobble box, tidbit, tidbit. Okay, so we'll get started with the LED indicator tidbit that just shows us our signal coming out. Blue for positive, red for negative. This is great for checking your signals to see if things are working right, or to just visualize things better with a mult or a splitter cable, a stackable, etc. And this is handy in showing the next section, the mutes. We'll start with the regular on-off mute, and we'll plug the LED in. You can see that it is on. Press and release, and it is off. Press down, and it's on, and off. Simple on-off mute button. And now we have our on-off momentary switch, which in the center position is off. Flick it towards the jack, and it is unmuted. And you go the opposite direction, and it is a momentary unmute. And when you release, it mutes it. And speaking of momentary, we now have the momentary mute or kill switch that only when pressed does it mute our signal. And last but not least, we have the momentary unmute, I guess you would call it, where it is muted until you press the button down. Then it's unmuted. And back to muted when released. So if the other one's a kill switch, this is in a live switch. Anyways, let's hear some examples of these mutes in action. So right now, I have the momentary unmute patched from the LFO on Mingles again, and that is going into monocle there between crest and oct. And I'm mixing that with volt per octave and only adding a touch of input from that LFO for some vibrato to add into Manus Iteratus. What that sounds like. And I have it patched into a little delay. So that's with it on all the time. Let's see how we can make that musical. The momentary unmute. Now let's check out the regular momentary mute. Now for the momentary mute, I'm going to add to this patch. We're going to put it on the end of my chain here where it's going into my mixer. So now you can hear we get a little click, but that's to be expected, especially with a passive mute, unless it's using Vactrolls or something. And I'm having this post delay and everything that if you put it before reverb, it'll really be fine. Actually, let's put this before the delay. So now it's in the input before our delay. let's turn off the delay for a second so we could just hear it without that. And now let's just swap this mute with the momentary on-off switch. So it's at the center point, so it's going to be off right now. As I'm playing my notes, it is off. Now it's on. And let's check out the momentary. Also, be sure to hold the back of this while you're doing it so you're not putting any strain on the jack input on your module. Let's leave that on for now, and I'm going to swap this momentary unmute for just the on-off button. And that is the mutes. And now on to the overdrive. So to start, we could kind of use either input, but I believe the audio input is meant for the top jack. So I'm going to plug an oscillator into the top jack. Let's bring up our volume here. And I have a triangle wave going into the oscillator. Now this knob seems like it's backwards, that it's giving us more drive when we go counterclockwise versus clockwise, so yours may be different. We can see we're getting just, a little bit of drive, a little clipping sound on this waveform. Let's morph it a little into a saw wave. So we can see we're getting some clipping towards the top of the wave. And then pulse wave, it's giving us an interesting houndstoothy sort of shape. Let's go back to the triangle wave. And then we can patch control voltage into the second input, and we can really drive it. I have just an LFO going in right now, and it is bipolar. And the LFO is negative right now, and now it is positive, negative, positive. And let's turn this drive down a little. You can see, let's zoom in a little more. So we can see we're getting a good amount of drive on that triangle wave with an LFO going into that CV input. Let's go to our saw wave. You can see we're getting quite a bit of morphing, and it's almost giving us like a pulse width modulation sort of effect, but not on pulse width. And to the pulse wave, which it's not really doing all that much with the CV. And what if we put an LFO onto that waveform? And let's speed up the LFO going into the drive. Let's get rid of the LFO on the morph. And what if we actually patched two oscillators from our main oscillator? So what if I patched in this triangle wave, and then I also patched in, say, a saw wave at the same frequency into the CV input? See, we're getting quite a bit more drive, but it's constant, that we're not getting that nice changing effect that we would get with a different oscillator. So, and you can see here too, there is an LED behind the wrap to show us the drive amount. And with that, let's go to the fuzz, which is very similar. So here's the fuzz. Looks the same inputs and outputs, and it has the same LED sort of thing going on. Now I'm going to patch into the top input as our audio input. We can see it's really offsetting our waveform quite a bit. So now you can see we have a level that's going in the right direction, and it's not doing too much, and then it's kind of doing a lot. And let's check out putting it in the other input without anything else, just so you can hear how that sounds, because it does sound a little different. You can see it's kind of jumping the opposite direction. And when we turn on the volume, it's just pulling those harmonics out. So let's go back to the top, and I'm going to plug that LFO into the CV input. Start with the low, and I'm going to just turn the knob up. And again, this is with the triangle wave. We really get a nice dancing waveform here. And let's check out the saw wave. So it's doing some weird clipping and then adding some pulses to it. And when we go to the pulse output, it's really only affecting the level, and it's giving us a little bit of harmonics, but not all that much different than just not sending it through a fuzz. And here's an actual sine wave. Now, what if we stacked up the fuzz and the overdrive, and I put a different sine wave into each of them? I end up with a weird setup like this that I can plug in. And let's turn our drive up and our fuzz up. And that's with the sine wave. Let's go back to our morph wave. The pulse wave is actually the most unique here. It's giving us a really interesting shape morph going on. That is the overdrive and fuzz. And now let's take a look at the OR. And to best understand how the OR works, I'm going to show you very quickly with two different LFO forms. So say we have a sine wave coming in, and then say we have a saw wave coming in from another module. So what the OR does is, instead of mixing the signals, it's just going to follow the highest path it can between overlaying both LFOs like this. So it's going to follow that sine wave until those spikes go up higher than the sine wave, and then it'll go back to following that sine wave. And this OR is a three-way OR, so you could add in a third LFO, and basically it still just takes the max voltage it's receiving at any point in time. So we'll start by plugging in just the sine wave. We can see that this OR is doing half-wave rectification, meaning that anything in the negative voltage is just clipped off and it stays at 0 volts. So that is our sine wave going in, and then we add our saw wave, Now we have those saw wave points sticking out from the sine wave. And let's give this at least a little interest by patching this to the pitch of something. There we go. And now I'm going to just patch in some random step voltages from steps. So you can see there's lots of really fun uses for an OR, and really great small package for an OR that you're not taking up any module space. And that is the OR. Now on to the Wobble Box. So what the Wobble Box is, it's just a little contact mic inside of this box here, and you can shake it for real subtle effects with CV. For example, I have this oscillator. And I plug into my FM input. Turn it up. And when I shake this, we should get some pitch wobble. Let's turn it up a little. So we could get nice, subtle pitch effects. Or on higher frequencies, you get some nice little vibrato with your waveform. It's also great for tapping. Or do other things with it. Just drop it. And that's it for the rundowns and walkthroughs of the tidbits. And now let's check out some music made using these tidbits.